Hey everyone, happy Wellness Wednesday. Marco Rodriguez coming at you. Wow, so I'm really super excited to share a little bit about what I learned a couple weeks ago at one of the largest and what I would consider one of the best biohacking conferences I've ever attended. So as I mentioned before, the term biohack is a term that's used within the science of nutrigenomics, which is the science of how natural compounds affect us all the way down to our gene expression. Now we all know that if you eat junk food on a consistent basis, you're probably not going to be very healthy. On the other hand, if you're very diligent about eating healthy, you stand a greater chance of maintaining your health. But what the science of nutrigenomics does, it takes this all the way down to the genetic expression. So just a quick history. Now, the idea of genetics has existed for thousands of years. However, it wasn't until 1905 when William Bateson first coined the term genetics. In 1953, James Watson discovered the double helix structure of the DNA. And from 1990 to 2000, the human genome was mapped out. And we now know that we have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20,000 genes in our body. But what most people don't realize is that only 10% of those genes are actually set, they're almost set in stone. And what that means is that the other 90% of your genetic makeup can be affected almost like a dimmer switch, either up or down regulated, depending on its exposure to environmental toxins or even healthy nutrients. So, for example, we all have those inflammatory genes. And those genes are very important. If you've ever rolled your ankle, it's probably swollen, right? Got swollen. Well, that inflammatory process is important to protect the area that was injured. So our inflammatory genes are very important, but the problem occurs as our body's consistently bombarded with environmental toxins, whether it be the food you eat, the air you breathe. And so what happens is those inflammatory genes are turned on a consistent and constant basis, leading to chronic inflammation. So what this group of scientists has done is taken the science of nutrigenomics and looked at how natural compounds affect not only our overall health, but how this affects us, what we call the three theories of aging, as well as how it affects the disease process like cancer, diabetes, Parkinson's, lupus, fibromyalgia, and a host of other diseases. Now, before I go any further, I want to make it clear that we always want to follow FDA guidelines and say that we are not making claims that we treat, cure, or mitigate disease. But what we can say is that we know that there are over 200 disease processes that are linked in some way to high levels of oxidative stress, also known as free radicals, as well as mitochondrial dysfunction. And we know that our NRF2 formula is clinically proven to reduce oxidative stress by an average of 40% in 30 days and up to 70% in 120 days. Now, the NRF1 formula is clinically proven to promote mitochondrial biogenesis. So next week we'll talk about mitochondrial dysfunction, but for now let's stick with oxidative stress. So what is oxidative stress? Now, the best way I can explain it is if you cut an apple and you let it sit out for a while, what happens to the apple? Right, it turns brown or it oxidizes. Well, that very process is happening inside of our bodies. It comes from, again, the food you eat, the air you breathe, and all the environmental toxins that we're exposed to. It's the same process that occurs when you wet metal and you let it sitting out, exposed to air, it begins to oxidize. So in a way, it's almost fair to say that you're rusting from the inside out. And that oxidation is one of the key factors that leads to hundreds of diseases. So traditionally, we've tried to reduce our oxidative stress by maintaining a healthy diet. However, science now tells us that it's virtually impossible to eat enough good food to combat the amount of environmental toxins that we're exposed to. And one of the reasons is that supplementing with antioxidant removes antioxidants on a one-to-one basis. However, biohacking with NRF2 creates or activates approximately 300 enzymes in your body, of which what I like to call the big three, which is catalase, glutathione, and superoxide dismutase, also known as SOD. And in doing so, you activate your body's ability to reduce free radicals by over 1 million to 1 ratio per second, every second in every cell of your body. Now, these scientists have discovered a formula that reduces your free radicals, your oxidative stress levels, by an average of 40% in 30 days and up to 70% in 120 days. Now, I don't know this for sure, but one of the scientists stated that this works 100% of the time on 100% of mammals. And it may not necessarily work on birds or reptiles because they don't have the same types of enzymes that we do, but if you're a mammal, this will probably work for you. Now imagine what your body's able to do if you were able to slow down and reduce by up to 70%, one of the key factors associated with all these different diseases, as well as biohacking into the aging process. These guys were even talking about some of the studies in which they activated NRF2 inside of a dying cell. The cell began to repair the cellular membrane, creating new and healthy mitochondria, as well as repairing the DNA. Now, I'm certainly not a microbiologist, but it sounds to me like they were able to turn back the clock, the biological clock, inside of that cell. Maybe that's why Washington State University said that NRF2 may well become the most extraordinary therapeutic and most extraordinary preventative breakthrough in the history of medicine. Now, unfortunately, that's all I have for you today. I mean, gosh, I could literally talk about this I could talk about this for hours and hours, but many of you are probably tuning out by now. So if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you might have. So that's it for me today. Y'all have a great rest of the day. And remember, as I always like to say, there is a better way to live. Love you.